Talk. Listen to the audio podcast or download today's program at afr.net. You can also read Brian Fisher's columns at onenewsnow.com. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email us at any time at focalpoint@afr.net. focalpoint@afr.net.
Hi, and welcome to Focal Point AFR Talk. Welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk, this Monday edition. Don't forget, in just 1 hour, we're going to be going to the Heart Cry for Revival Conference at the Billy Graham Training Center, Asheville, North Carolina, at the Cove for a live broadcast from there. That will start in 1 hour and 3 minutes. So just a heads up, we're going to be breaking away from this program to go to that live program. Now, we've been talking here in the opening segment here about this Boston Muslim massacre and the two brothers that were responsible for this. And here to help us sort of analyze and sort through some of what's going on in Boston and maybe give us some reaction to the breaking news that he's not going to be classified by President Obama as an enemy combatant. Apparently, there's going to be a charge of weapons of mass destruction, which certainly this pressure cooker bomb was. Had another one that they threw at the police when they were trying to make their getaway after that shootout at the 7-Eleven. But we're honored to welcome to our decision maker line Jan Morgan. She is an Associated Press award-winning veteran television investigative journalist. Got a picture. And Jan, welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Hi, Brian. Great to talk with you again.
Now, Jan, you can get more information about Jan at janmorganmedia.com, janmorganmedia.com, and she's been kind enough to post some of the columns that I have written on their website there. But Jan, just before we get into what I want to talk to you about, you sort of identify yourself as a Second Amendment activist, and I'm looking here at the bio sheet from your website. It's got you standing there with this "don't mess with me" look in your eyes, holding an AR-15. I mean, I never would have guessed that you would be a fan of the Second Amendment just looking at the picture.
Of course. Actually, I'm an NRA-certified firearms instructor and range safety officer, so it's more than just a love of the Second Amendment. I enjoy teaching women and men, for that matter, around the country gun basics and gun safety, gun handling. So, yes, I'm very much a strong Second Amendment advocate nationally.
Well, let's talk about what's going on now with this Boston Muslim thing. I played the soundbite in the opening segment of President Obama saying, look, we can't rush to judgment here. We've got to wait till we have all the facts. We've got to wait till the investigation is complete. We have courts for this purpose and all that. Basically, President Obama is saying, look, I don't want anybody making any judgments about Islam or about Muslims or groups of Muslims, not anything. But this is the guy that went out and immediately castigated the Boston police as racists the night they arrested Dr. Gates.
You know, Brian, it amazes me. It doesn't shock me that President Obama has taken the position he's taken because he did the same thing before. Anytime there was a terrorist act involving a Muslim, which, by the way, that seems to be the majority of terrorist acts that are occurring around the world are connected with Islam, the president stands up in front of the American people and says, we're not going to blame any one group of people, any one religion for this sort of activism and this extremism. But the bottom line, Brian, is this. When the Quran has 109 verses that command its Muslim followers to hate, murder, and terrorize all human beings who refuse to submit or convert to Islam, how can you not look at Islam and say there is a problem here? It's not the people who are committing these acts of terror, these murderous rampages, are not extremists. They are, in fact, devout Muslims simply following the dictates of their Quran.
Well, and that brings me to the point, the column that I had written and published over the weekend. You know, and I was suggesting, I want to see, Jan, if you think this is kind of too extreme a position, but we know what's in the Quran. It's in black and white. Slay the idolaters wherever you find them. That's just one of 109 verses that advocate the same kind of thing. So the issue to me is the ideology that someone who is a devout follower of Islam is bringing into this country. And it seems to me that at some point we have to re-examine whether it is in our national security interest to continue the immigration of Muslims into the United States. Is that too extreme?
No, Brian, I don't think it's too extreme. But not only do we need to be concerned about immigration, we need to look at homegrown terrorism. We need to look at the mosques that are emerging around our country and what they're teaching. And the bottom line is this. If you are Muslim and you are a mosque-attending Muslim, then you are participating, you have to participate in something called zakat, Z-A-K-A-T. That is a mandated form of tithing, and it has already been proven by our federal government that a portion of that tithe is being funneled to fund terrorism. So knowingly or unknowingly, all mosque-attending Muslims in this country are funding terror. Now, let me say this. If you think that your position is a little radical, let me tell you what I believe the solution to this problem is. Because obviously those are very clear verses in the Quran. And their Quran is divided into two parts in Mecca and Medina, just like we have an Old Testament and New Testament. And unfortunately for us and the rest of the world, those murderous dictates are in their New Testament, so to speak. My position is this. What we need to do is go back and look at the First Amendment and define what our founding fathers meant by religion, freedom of worship. And I believe that we need to adopt this particular position. Any religion that's holy book or book of directives commands its followers to commit crimes that are against the laws of this country, then that religion loses its tax-exempt religious status, should be reclassified as a terrorist organization and be banned from practice here. Now, that doesn't focus just on Islam. It focuses on any religion that tells its followers you have to commit crimes that are against the laws, against the constitutional law of this country, because we do live by constitutional law, not Sharia law.
Well, you know, it's interesting, Janet, you bring that up, because I've talked for some time, and my understanding of the First Amendment, let me just I may have a little bit different take than you do, but I think the Founding Fathers, and it was clear from Joseph Story's history of the Constitution, what they were wrestling with the First Amendment was Christianity. This was all about Christianity and trying to protect the free exercise of Christianity. That's what they meant by religion, because that's all there was. 99.8% of the people in America at the time of the founding were followers of Christianity. 0.2% were Jews. So when they talked about religion, they were talking about Christianity and the various denominations. And they said, look, we're not going to have a national church. Congress can't do that. We're not going to pick one Christian denomination and make it the National Church of the United States. But some of the states, 9 of them, as a matter of fact, did have established churches, that is Christian denominations that had preference in law and were supported with taxpayer dollars in 9 of the 13 states. And they said, we're going to let the states decide how they handle the issue of religious expression. That's entirely an issue of state to state. And so it seems to me from a constitutional standpoint, states would certainly have the authority under the Constitution as it was given to us by the founders to prohibit the building of any more mosques and to prohibit the practice of Islam in their state as a threat to national security, because its very ideology is a threat to our freedom.
Brian, you may be onto something there, and what I am noticing as a Second Amendment advocate is more states bowing up against the federal government, which I'm really excited to see, because when our federal government started trying to pass, once again, gun control laws on the American people, and especially when Barack Obama sent Hillary with a mandate to sign the UN Small Arms Treaty, which you and I have talked about that before, more states in this country have signed on to and passed legislation called the Firearm Freedom Act. I think there are like 26 states now that have signed on to this. And it basically tells the federal government, we don't care what kind of federal laws you come up with regarding gun rights. We are sovereign states. And in our state, our citizens are going to only respond to laws that our citizens determine, any regulations they want to be under regarding firearms. And furthermore, if you send federal agents into our state to try to enforce your federal gun laws, then we're going to arrest you. So I think that we're seeing that kind of bowing up, and we know what Arizona did, Governor Jan Brewer did on the immigration issue. So you've got immigration, you've got gun rights, and I think that we're going to get to a point where that's going to happen, just what you just suggested, that states are going to get tired of the federal government ramming Islam down their throats, and for the security of the security interest of their state citizens. I think you may very well see states stand up and bow up against the federal government and do exactly what you said.
Well, you know, in suspending or banning Muslim immigration in the United States, constitutionally clearly can be done. The Supreme Court upheld and Congress is given by the Constitution the right to regulate immigration and naturalization. That is a power of Congress. They're not told what the parameters are, and the Supreme Court said, look, they can decide whatever the parameters are that qualify somebody for admission to the United States. You almost get this sense that the American people believe that immigration to the United States is a constitutional right, that everybody in the world has a right to come and live in the United States. Absolutely not. Congress is the one that has the authority to decide who comes in and who doesn't. And Congress upheld a right, or the Supreme Court upheld the right of Congress to ban those that believed in Marxist ideology from immigrating to the United States. I think this was back in the 50s. And the Supreme Court said, yeah, you can do that. Congress can write whatever rules they want. So if Congress has the will they can make a decision that we will not allow those that believe in a totalitarian ideology, such as Islam or whatever the case may be, from migrating into the United States.
The key there is when Congress gets the will. In your statement, I don't think that our Congress is going to get the will to do anything other than give themselves raises. So I think what's going to happen here is it's more likely, if anything happens, it will be what you suggested, that states will stand up and stand up for their sovereignty and the security of their own citizens and promote their own legislation.
One of the things that struck me looking at the Second Amendment not too long ago is it said the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Right.
And, you look at the 10th Amendment, if it's not given to the federal government, it is reserved for the states or to the people, respectively. In other words, there are certain rights that are so profound that they are reserved for the people. Not even states can take away a right that is reserved for the people, and the right to keep and bear arms is one of those rights. So not only is the federal government prohibited from infringing, not even a state government can infringe on the right of the people to keep and bear arms.
Well, I agree with you there because I don't believe the Second Amendment was about state or federal government rights. I believe that our founding fathers were telling the government, it was more of a mandate to the government of keep your hands off, because the right to defend life is a God-given right. It has nothing to do with the United States. This is a God-given right. Human beings have a right in this country to defend their life and their property. So that right shall not be infringed. It was not a mandate to the citizens. It was a mandate to the government. Keep your hands off in this particular area. And, I like that because what the government gives, the government can take away. And if we ever look at the Second Amendment and say, well, the government is giving the citizens the right to bear arms, then we also have to view it as the government has the right to take away that gift. So it is not a gift from the government. It's not a right given by the government. It is a right ordained by God to defend your life and your liberty.
One last comment, Jan. I'll give you. You only have about 20 seconds to respond to this, but that guy that found the guy hiding in the boat.
Yes.
He freaked and ran inside and hid and called the cops. I'm looking at your picture here, and I'm thinking if that guy was in a boat in Jan Morgan's backyard, something tells me that guy never would have had a chance to crawl out of that boat.
I'm not going to comment on the grounds that it might incriminate me. So thanks for the suggestion, Brian.
All right. Our guest has been Jan Morgan, janmorganmedia.com, Associated Press award-winning veteran journalist, and now a Second Amendment advocate, activist, and also someone that is giving us the information, straight truth about the threat that Islam represents. Thank you, Jan, for taking time to be with us.
You bet, Brian. My pleasure.
Jan Morgan of janmorganmedia.com. We'll be back with your phone calls. I'd like to get your reaction on this whole immigration Boston Muslim massacre thing. 888-589-8840. 888-589-8840.